Hello. This week I've been going through some of my old stock, and I've got a lot of bits that I've bought over time and then never got round to using. So I thought what I'd do this week is do a small piece of scatter terrain. And what I'm thinking is I've got this farmhouse. I mean, it could be any of my buildings really. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to use, over time, like everybody, I think, you end up with lots of offcuts from plastic and card and whatever. And I've got a couple of pieces here. And what I'm basically thinking is that I could make a scatter piece of a garden and use some of these plastic bits that I've got that I've had kicking around. So with this one, what I'm thinking is I could build a bit of a garden, that'll attach to this house or any of the other houses, and utilise some of these little, I don't know, I've got a greenhouse, for instance, and I've got a chicken coop and different bits that I've bought over time and then never got round to using. So I thought what I'd do is I'd build a garden for this one and just show you, how I'm going to use my spares up, really. Right, so what I think I'm going to do first is I'm going to build up this greenhouse. I can't remember exactly where I got it. It came with all these little stacked flower pots and even the stands and shelving units for inside the greenhouse. But certainly I'd have got it off eBay or something like that. So it's worth having a look round on there because there's more and more people printing 3D items now. It's looking not too bad. At the minute I might adjust it round a little bit, but that's the basic greenhouse. Right, what I'll do is I'll put together the little internal parts to it, and then I'll bring you back when I'm ready to start moving on to the garden. Right, so as you can see, I've built everything for the greenhouse itself. Obviously I've not glued any of this down, so I can still take it apart at the moment. I haven't made up my mind whether to have that so I can open it. I suppose there's a potential that men could go inside there, but what shelter they'd be gaining, I don't know. So I'll probably keep it closed so it's got a bit more stability. I've not glued any of these down yet because obviously I want to paint all this up, and I'm toying with the idea of cutting some plastic to make the actual glass inside this. I've not made up my mind yet, but obviously before I do that I'll need to undercoat everything and paint it up. So that's the little greenhouse. And the other thing that I've done is using these strips that I've got and some offcuts, I've managed to cobble together, I'm going to pan that out a bit, a decent sized baseboard. I mean, obviously it's not ideal, but I'm just making use of what I've got. It would have been better all in one piece, but it's glued fairly firm, and I'll be building across this, so it'll add to its stability. And, it'll make like an ideal garden size. And what I'm thinking about at the minute is, when it comes to positioning the greenhouse and the garden and bits like that, I want it to serve two purposes. So what I thought is I'd have part of the edge of the garden as a stone wall, and that way it'd give hard cover. And then on the other side, maybe a bush or hedge. So that's just soft cover. So it just gives it a bit of playability, two ways of using it. Right, so what I've found, I've got some spare bits of wall that I've cut to shape for this side of the garden and down the back edge as well. And then another thing that I've found in my collection is some, I picked this up at a local model shop, and it's hedge, but obviously it's meant for a Hornby Railway setup, you know, double O. But I've only got a little bit anyway, so I think what I'm going to do is I've cut it in two, so I've got the right length for the garden. And then I'm going to cut this a bit thinner, line that flat. I can then glue the edge on top of it, and that'll make the thickness that I need. You know, so it's the right height for the 28mm soldiers. It's a bit of a faff, I know, but it'll look the part. And I'm using, you know, a little oddman that I've come across. Right, so I've cut the walls to shape, and I've glued them in place now. And I've glued the base of the greenhouse down as well. And the little garden that's next to it, the little raised garden. And what I'm doing now is I'm just mixing up some green stuff so that I can fill these little gaps, whether you can see that in the wall where it meets the uprights. They're smaller on some than others, but I still want to block them up because I think they'll look really weird if I don't, and then I can give it some time to dry. Right, so I've used the green stuff, I don't know whether you can see it, just to fill all these joins in the brick wall where the upright posts are. You probably see it better on this end, you can see the green there. And I've just textured it in so it forms the same shape as the stone, so it should disappear with the painting. But as usual, when you mix up green stuff, I've mixed up a bit too much. So rather than wasting it, you won't see these very well because they're only small, but I've fashioned a few vegetables, you know, things like the top of an onion and a cabbage, bits and bobs like that really. I thought I might as well use it. Right, so as you can see, I've sprayed this, well, primed it with some brown. I'm giving it a thorough coating both sides, and I've also used that to prime the benches and obviously the greenhouse itself. And what I'm doing now is I've just been drawing out some lines on this, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut some paving stones, and I'm going to have them running from the door round to this, and then from the middle going down to the back, and then maybe a small patio. And I'm going to stick them on so it literally does look raised, like a little slab. So that's what I'm doing at the moment. Right, so I've formed the first few paths around the greenhouse, and now I'm just coming down towards the front of the garden with another little row of slabs. What I will do with these, when they've dried, before I paint them, I'll roll a piece of tin foil into a tight ball and use that to form a little bit of an imprint on them, you know, just to give them a bit of texture so they don't look too, you know, flat and plain. Right, so I've put the little patio type area bit on now, And what I'm going to do before I start painting anything up is I'm going to put a little bit of this polyfiller plaster just down in this area, because I'm going to have a little garden here. I need to put it on reasonably thin, but at the same time leave enough so I can leave an impression. I probably have to use my fingers really to get right in on this, but initially I'm going to do it with this. I came across this. It actually came in an air dye that my wife used, and so I just begged this before it got dumped, and I'm going to use that to put my grooves in. Ideal for the job. As you can see, I shall definitely keep this little thing. It's obviously going to come in handy. Right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to let that dry, and then what I'm going to be doing is painting up the wall to how I really want it, and the greenhouse how I want it. Right, so I'll just update you on what I've done so far. I continued the path and painted that up, and I've used a little ball of foil to put lots of marks in the card that formed it. It's not finished yet, but I've got like the first coat down on it. The garden that you saw me creating the pattern on, I finished that, and what I've done is I've painted some glue on there, and then I've trickled my sifted soil and what's it called, grout mixture. So I've sprinkled that on there, and I'm just going to leave that to dry, and then I've also painted up this base. The other thing I managed to get done was the greenhouse. I've given that a old wood style covering now, and the same with the benches. Painted up the pots on the ends. Right, I thought just give you an idea of where I've got to now. One little thing that I've done is I've decided to paint up the little plant shelves, plant trays, a slightly different colour, just to bring them to life a bit more. I'm going to put some little, you know, plants and things in some of these anyway, but just thought I'd get that bit done. And now the other thing, I don't think I've gone mad. You can see that I've been painting the individual bricks different colours. Now I know that looks a little bit Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds at the moment, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a kind of a dry brush with this acrylic, I don't know what the actual colour is on it, tan, and that'll bring it all together and take all that, you know, kind of crazy stuff back down, so it's just different tones. So that's what I'm going to do now. And what I'm doing is I'm getting a bit on the brush. Bring it over here, you'll see it a bit more. And I'm just getting quite a bit of it off, not all of it. And then what I'll be doing is brushing it over. So it's a bit more than a dry brush, because it tames the colours down, but it doesn't obscure them altogether. You can see you've got like the different colours, you know, sandstone, different stone, but it's not as in your face as that. And that's the effect I was going for anyway. Right, so what I'm doing now is I've put some PVA down around the outside of the garden and where the edge will be, and I'm going to put some of my sieved soil and grout mix there to form like a, you know, a side garden. That's it. I'll let that sit on it for a while, make sure that the glue's grabbed most of it, but that's what it's looking like. Right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to lay the little lawn area just here, and I've gone for some 4mm autumn type grass. I don't want it to be too bright, and I think that one would suit the model the best. So I've just put some glue down in the little square area where I want it, and now I'm going to add that in. So I've put a little pin in the crocodile clip to stick in the glue, and then away we go. Right, that should be enough. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to tidy up my desk, and then I can take out all the excess that's gone everywhere, obviously. Right, so what I'm going to do next, I've got this edge material that I joined together in sections, but just to bring it to life a little bit more and to give it a few more colours, I'm going to paste some PVA on there, and then I'm going to sprinkle a little bit of this leaf cover, mid-green. I think I got it from Geek Gaming. I'm going to do it both sides and on the top. Like I say, it'll just give it a bit more texture. There we go. Right. Not too much, I don't want to darken it completely, but just some. But I have actually got a little bit of the lighter colour leaf as well, which is leaf cover light green, and it is from Geek Gaming. Right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just let that go off a bit before I turn it over, because I don't want to be sticking it to the towel and things. So I'll just let that dry a little bit, and then I'll turn it over and do the same on that side. Right, so now that my edge has dried, what I've done is I've put a little bit of super glue against the wall and 3 or 4 little blobs just to grab it, but mainly I've laid a layer of PVA down, and that'll grab it all the way along. But I just needed something that would hold it without squeezing the hedge up, you know, by clamping it down or something, and that'll let the PVA do the rest of the job. But I'm going to let that dry now and probably focus on the tables next. Right, now that that's dried, I'm just going to be using a little bit of this soft tone wash to take the walls down a little bit. It just gives them a bit more of a, you know, they're not so bright and fresh like it's newly been put up. If I show you this bit, that's before we've applied the wash, so you can still, it looks a bit fresh. And then after the wash, I mean, what I'll do is I'll let that dry, and if I think it needs another one to tame it down a bit more, I will do. So what I'm doing now is I've got some old tuft boxes that I've kept for the plastic, and I'm just at the minute cutting out squares of usable plastic that I can use to put windows in my greenhouse. Right, so what I've been doing now is I'll actually put all the glass in the greenhouse now. I don't know whether you can see it very clearly. But I put, you know, I've covered every single window and a little bit on the door. And I mean, obviously it's a little bit fiddly doing this, but it's not too bad, and it's definitely worth the effort. But a little thing that happened to me while I was doing this, I admit it was just a mistake on my part, but it's worked out quite well. And that is, because I needed something fast to grab it, I used super glue to grab hold of it. And I tried to be really, really sparing. But you know what it's like, you know, occasionally you'll have a drip that it just comes out too much. And then I know, you know, I tried to wipe it off. And I don't know whether you can see there on some of them front windows, whether I'm catching it in the light. But it left a smear. And I tell you what, it looks just like condensation you'd get on your greenhouse. So it just goes to show that, you know, even if you're clumsy like me, sometimes accidents can work out for the best. So I was so pleased with it, I actually deliberately recreated it in places to give it that look. So I'm quite pleased with that, but, you know, I'm not claiming that I did it by design, it were an accident. The only other little thing that I've done after doing that is I mixed up a tiny piece of, a tiny bit of resin, and I hollowed out, I'll bring it up, I can't move it around too much because it's not set, but you see the barrel, I hollowed out the top of it and then poured some muddy resin into it, And I thought that'd look good as a water butt next to the greenhouse, you know, where he dips his watering can to water the garden. You know, maybe I'm getting carried away. Do you think I am? But I just thought, you know, it just gives it another layer of realism. Right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to plant up some of these individual containers on the benches, using, you know, a collection of tufts that I've got, you know, just oddments. Got some little white ones there. Got these. Got some flower ones. I'm just going to pick out a few that are going to just make them a bit more interesting to look at. Right, so that's the first one. Get that into focus. So it's just to give it a bit of a, you know, the look of a working greenhouse. Oh. Right. That's got another one in. Right, I'll carry on with this and I'll bring you back. And I'll show you what I've done with the final view. Right, as you can see, it's nearly all together now. I've made the decision in the end to stick the greenhouse down. I think stability is the better thing to go for on this. And the chances of me wanting to hide a man inside a greenhouse is remote anyway. I'll bring it a little bit nearer so you can see some of the individual veg. I had some plastic veg that I got on eBay, and I've put those in the raised bed. The others, as you know, here, those ones and those ones are made with the green stuff I had left over when I put together patches on the walls. And then the rest are made from tufts. And then what I've done is I've scattered just red and yellow scatter to represent small flowers in the beds near the wall and near the bushes. Unfortunately you can't see it very well now, but at the back of the greenhouse I made a cucumber plant, and whether you can just see it through that window where there's an open window. And basically what I did with that is I used a needle from a pine tree, and then I wrapped a little bit of cotton round it, and then sprinkled some green leaves on it, and then used the green stuff cucumbers that I made the other day, and planted that up in that pot. You might be able to see it around the back a bit more. Oh yeah, you can just see it. And then individual things on the bench of things that are ready to be planted out. So that's pretty much done now. I've got the little bit of resin that I put in there to represent the you know, like a water barrel, you know, that he can dip his watering can in. And then the final thing that I'm going to be doing for this, which is what inspired it in the first place, I've got this old picture of my granddad, and I came across this figure that reminded me of him, and it's a man leaning on his spade. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint this figure up and then perhaps pop him in here somewhere, you know, leaning on his spade at the end of digging his veg in, and that'll be it complete then. So first thing I need to do now is to undercoat my granddad and start painting him up. Right, I'll bring you back. Right, so it's complete. I've painted up my granddad figure. You can see him there. And placed him in the veg. As I say, I've sealed this down. I will take some close-up photos just for you to have a better look at things, because I know the video camera doesn't catch it all, but I just wanted to give you a feel for how it would work with one of the houses. And with that, I'm going to call it done, really. It's not something I do for every building on the battle table, but I do think having some hedgerows to fight over and gardens to clamber into. I mean, I've brought out 1 or 2 soldiers just to show you how they would work. And obviously, I've got hardcover on this side as I'd originally planned, and hardcover out the back here as well. And then I've got the soft cover of the edge. You know, it'd be worth doing a few plain gardens as well. You could have a street of it if you wanted it. But I'm probably just going to make do for one for now, but probably add a few more to it over time. But it just gives a bit more of a feel of a living town. I mean, I know my granddad figure would probably have took cover by now. But it doesn't matter. It's just there for a bit of eye candy, really. So I'm sure my granddad would have been pleased, because he fought in the First World War. He was in France and Belgium, so he's probably going to be in France and Belgium again. In model form. So, right, what I'll do is I'll close it with a few photographs, a bit of music with it, and I'll see you again next week. Bye.